Welcome, Wednesday, March 13th, to the Minnesota Senate Human Services Committee. We have 4 bills up today, so members, we want to try to get done before 9 p.m. tonight, if that's at all possibility, especially since the first one we have like 20 people that want to testify on Senator Pappas's bill. So I'm glad, Brian Elliott, you're shaking your head, because I was seeing if Sandy was paying attention. So Senator Pappas, we have, I guess, what are you doing? The other body, number 19, to our committee, and it looks like you got Elliott Payne, Megan Boyle, Jason Atkins, and Francis Hall are going to be testifying on the bill, or against it, or for it, or whatever. But Senator Pappas, welcome to the committee. And one of the things I want to just premise is the reason why it's here is there's conversation about, as systems are moving, right, any kind of systems change. Let me remind people that 1 in 4 people in the state of Minnesota live with some kind of disability, right, when you start to look at some of the things that are out there. So public policy touches somebody in a lived experience that's going to live with something or have something in their life that should be part of the public discussion. And so what's really our jurisdiction is any of those services to folks that are providing PCA, home health, CNA, long-term care, that big bucket under 256B. I just say take a prod swipe of anybody that's got their fingers on 256B is probably going to have some kind of alliance in our committee. So with that, Senator Pappas, if you want to let us know what we have, and I believe that you have an A1 amendment when it gets to the time, or an A2, excuse me, you have an A2 amendment. Right. So if you want to, Senator Fate will move the A2 amendment, and Senator Pappas, if you could tell us what your A2 amendment entails.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I want to make sure everyone knows that the bill before you is Earned Sick and Safe Time, and we're taking up the House file. And the reason I'm bringing this bill before the legislature is really that everyone gets sick. And the pandemic was another reminder that when people get sick, they should be able to stay at home, not just for their own health or that of the loved one, but for the health of all of us. This bill would ensure Minnesota is a state where, regardless of the color of your skin, your income, or where you work, you can be there when your sick child needs you. Where you can go to the doctor before your illness goes from bad to worse, where you can take the time to recover from an illness or seek support in the wake of a sexual assault without worrying about missing bills or even losing your job. Because in many circumstances, it's still legal for workers to be fired for needing to take time off to care for themselves or a loved one. But this is also a public health issue, which should concern your committee, since many of the employees least likely to have paid sick time work in jobs such as food service, where choosing to come into work while sick can have real health implications for the general public. Mr. Chairman, then I'll jump to the A2 amendment, and these are just some kind of minor changes in the bill as we've been negotiating with stakeholders that we would appreciate it if your committee would add to the bill. The A2 amendment adds 2 provisions requested by DLI, one by Delta Airlines, and aligns the appropriation of the House file with the Senate file as it passed out of Judiciary. Page 1 through 18, page 1 lines 18 through 21 adds sick and safe time accrual to pay stubs, and page 3 lines 10 and 11 to remove some unclear language added on the House floor, both at the request of DLI. Page 3, line 3 through 9, adjusts the definition of employee to address airline cabin crews as long as they receive the same accrual as in the bill, request by Delta Airlines, and previously included in this bill as passed by the House prior to this year. Finally, page 3, line 12 through 15, removes the appropriation and conforming language from the House bill that was removed in the Senate Judiciary Committee last month. So we're trying to actually align the 2 bills and accommodate Delta Airlines. And that's the A2 amendment.
Members, Senator Utke. Senator Utke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just for clarification, Senator Pappas, did you just say that last part of the amendment was something that was removed in judiciary and now we're adding it back in?
Senator Pappas?
Yes. No, we are conforming the House bill to the Senate, what the Senate did in Judiciary Committee. Because we're
Senator
taking up
Ecke?
the House
Okay.
file now.
Senator
Okay.
Ecke? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So our judiciary change, we're staying with, we're adjusting the House. Okay,
That's correct. We're our Senate Judiciary
Senator
change.
Pappas.
thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
That was good. Thank you. Senator Abler, did you want to ask Senator Fate some questions on his amendment?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Senator Fonte, this is a very interesting amendment. I was curious on page 3, line 4. Mr. Chair, I don't have any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator Pappas, I can hear everything that's up here, and I overheard those guys laughing, so I thought I would do that. So any other questions on the A2 amendment? Senator Fate renews his motion for the A2 amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Senator Pappas, to your bill now that the A2 has been incorporated. You got some folks that want to come up and chat, or do you want to schwitz a little before they come up?
I think we could take the testifier, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Looks up, I see Councilmember Elliott Payne from the wonderful city of Minneapolis. Come on down, Mr. Payne. You're the next contestant. Megan Boyle, if you want to come down and grab a chair on the other side of Mr. Payne, that would be fine. So, Mr. Payne, welcome to the committee.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair Fate. My name is Elliott Payne. I use he, him pronouns, and I currently serve on the Minneapolis City Council representing my neighbors in Ward 1. I'm proud that Minneapolis is one of the 4 cities that have already passed earned sick and safe time policies alongside St. Paul, Bloomington, and Duluth. Together, the hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans who live in these cities have access to this support, and now the legislature has the opportunity to expand this coverage to all Minnesotans. I urge you to do so. I've seen firsthand how our city's earned sick and safe time policies have created a more level playing field, especially for low-wage workers, women, and people of color. These policies have also helped level the playing field across businesses of all sizes. Earned sick and safe time is good for employee retention and good for business. Here in Minnesota, we love to brag about our national rankings. We want to be the best state in the country for kids and families. But without a policy as fundamental as earned sick and safe time, we are at risk of falling behind. This is the opportunity to do this right. No matter our income or zip code, we all work hard for our families and show up for our communities. We all deserve to be able to support ourselves and our families without putting our health or our safety at risk. Let's join the 14 other states that have passed paid sick time and ensure all Minnesotans can lead dignified, safe, and healthy lives. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Councilmember Payne. Next, we have Megan Boyle, who will be testifying. So please introduce yourself for the record and proceed.
My name is Megan Boyle. I am a designated coordinator for a disability service provider, providing services for PCA services, direct support staff, and employment support services. It's been 3 years almost to the day since the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic. The pandemic has shown that our jobs, health, and care responsibilities are deeply entwined. As a disability service provider, I see firsthand the stark inequalities in the way that we all live and work. I also see how being able to take time off when it's necessary for our health and safety is a life or death need for Minnesotans. Right now, for many Minnesotans, they can't take that time without risking their job and putting their household finances at risk. According to the most recent estimates, there are still hundreds of thousands of working people in Minnesota who don't have job-protected hours to care for themselves or a loved one. I've personally had jobs where this protection was not guaranteed. It doesn't work well for business owners or workers. Workplaces and communities that have this essential policy have found that earned sick and safe time is a win-win that is good for business and employee retention and essential for workers. No one should have to worry about losing their job if they need a sick day. No one, specifically if they, like me, work closely with medically vulnerable people. No one should have to come to work when they need the time to stay safe. Earned sick and safe time is a common sense basic protection for workers, and employers that profit every single day off the labor of Minnesotans owe those workers the ability to stay healthy and safe. This is a proven and necessary policy that working people need.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Boyle. Jason Atkins and Francis Hall. Mr. Atkins, welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Hoffman and members of the committee. I'm Jason Adkins, Executive Director of the Minnesota Catholic Conference, the public policy voice of the Catholic Church in Minnesota. We're here today to express our support for House File 19, Senate File 34, because we believe this legislation sends a strong message that caring for children and families is an important part of our society. The employer-employee relationship is a reciprocal one, with both sides having responsibilities to each other. An employee is responsible for fulfilling their commitments to an employer by providing honest labor that produces quality goods and quality services. The employer is responsible for treating their employees justly and providing good work and fair pay that is consistent with each person's dignity and personal obligations to family. When an employer fails to do so, however, it's incumbent upon the state to set a set of minimum standards that protect the ability to recover from illness or care for loved ones. Caring for children, the sick, the elderly is a privileged place in which we grow in our humanity, and it is an integral part of family life that must be honored. Working people need the security to know that they have at least some time to recover from illness or care for family members without forfeiting their means of sustenance. Unfortunately, too many working people are forced to make an impossible financial choice between caring for a loved one and missing a paycheck or even getting fired. The dilemma disproportionately impacts hourly wage earners who fill roles that we have come to define as essential. According to federal data, although 96% of the country's highest paid workers receive paid sick leave, only 40% of the lowest workers do. This policy is long overdue. We encourage you to protect families by aligning our state's employment laws with the common good. Please vote yes on this passage of this legislation, and we're grateful for your service to the people of Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins. Frances Hall, welcome.
Hi, thank you. My name is Frances Hall, and I'm a licensed practical nurse for over 25 years. I am a member of SEIU Healthcare Minnesota. We need everyone in the state to be able to have safe sick time when they're, especially in the wintertime when we have influenza running around. I have had coworkers that have only taken like 2 days off of work while they had influenza and then turned around and came to work sick and wound up making other coworkers sick. Everybody in the state of Minnesota should be able to have sick days and not be in fear of losing their job after 2 days. So I encourage you to please pass this bill.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. So, members, so as we look at, I got some questions I think that are still remaining on what we're doing. I know we had asked specifically when we had paid family medical leave in front of us, right? So there's an industry out there, and SEIU represents part of that industry, absolutely, where the only way that you get paid as a vendor or a provider of services is when the state of Minnesota decides to give you your rate raise, right? So, for example, did you know, Senator Pappas, that if you're going to work in the elderly waivered services world, the way the reimbursement rate is, you're probably going to pay somebody $13.61 an hour to do their work in the elderly waivered services world. That's why people are not lining up to work with our elderly and elderly waivered services. And so you think, okay, so if we as a state, the only way that they get their wage increased is if we give a rate increase. So we give a rate increase X percent, right? And to me, I'm a simple math person. Actually, I'm not. I actually played a mathematician one time in a play, but that doesn't count. And I am a drummer, so I can subdivide quarter notes and half notes, and I can do all that stuff, right? When I looked at the simple math, and I thought, okay, help me understand if I'm going to give 3%, and this is, remember we were watching the hearing, and I said, that's $1. There's 30 hours or 1 hour for 30 hours, so it's 3%. But the cap is at 48 hours, therefore, if you really look across the board, it's 2%. So my math head, I was thinking, okay, who's going to pay for that, right? And that's why it's like, if the Department of Human Services, through the action by the legislature, then gives increased rates, right, then that's what happens. And again, I'm looking at this saying, so if I all of a sudden increase my rates by 2%, and yet then I turn around and then I'm, as the state, the only way, now the state's going to take another 2%, and if that's, because it's not really, it's 3%, but if you stretch it out 48 hours, you're really looking at about 2%, right? If I pull that, then it's actually, I'm not doing anything to help alleviate the crisis of support that we have. Right now, there are 53,000 job vacancies in the caregivers bucket, right? And I know elderly waiver services, there's a spreadsheet that shows them at 1361, 1381, all the way down to, thank God for SEIU and fighting now for, on behalf of PCAs and the PCAs that, you know, are going to get to $20 an hour. It really affects 25% because the reimbursement side of it, but I'm not going to bore you with that. So the question remains out there is like, what would be the discussion about how we assure that that's not something that's going to come on the backs of the people that are doing it, that somebody else has got to pay for that, right? And so that's where this conversation comes into play. And so I had asked Senator Abler, I remember we had this conversation before too about the, I had an amendment drawn, I had 3 different options that were drawn up. And I know the department is going to be providing some technical assistance. And I had been asked, members of this committee, don't do anything with the amendment, you know, but we'll have the assurance that we're going to go ahead and take this language and fix it, because we all want to make sure that we're being equitable and fair in this process. So I don't know if I should I introduce the A1 amendment? Let's have a conversation. Let's get the department, let's get Sandy or Senator Pappas and talk about what's the pathway to get our assurances in place, because I know council here is still waiting on some more technical assistance on that. So members, I want to ask you, what would you like us to do? Should we introduce the A1 amendment, have discussion? You want to do that, you think?
Mr.
Sandy,
Chairman,
what are you
yes,
thinking?
I'd really like you to introduce the amendment and adopt it and pass the bill on to the next stop.
Okay. Even because there's, Senator Pappas, I just wanted to let you know that within here, there's still some technical assistance that's needed from the department. Is that correct? I'm getting, yes, I've been told by yes. I'm seeing it back. Maybe, Ms. Bailey, you will wait. We'll amend this, and then one of you wonderful technical assistants, smart people can come down here and we can have the conversation. Senator Abler.
Well, thank you. And having read the amendment, I think given the scope of this committee and, you know, the burden that would be put on every long-term care employer across the state, they can't handle a 2% bump to pay, and they all have wanted to do this. And so if we're going to do it, we need to pay for it. So I'm
And
that we
actually,
should do
Senator
the
Abler and Mr. Chairman, I think it's only 0.75%. So it's a little bit less of a burden than
I don't,
think?
Mr. Chair.
some are already offering it.
Senator, say that, so this is what I want. So here's what I'm going to do. This is the conversation I want to have, so thank you, because let's move the amendment.
Yeah, sure.
Let's get, because there needs to be some technical assistance. Let's just have the conversation.
Should be
So
the Fate amendment.
I think so. This should be a Senator Fate moves the A1 amendment, so.
And Mr. Chairman, could I ask Mr. Elliott to also join us if we're going to have a conversation?
Oh, absolutely, and
Not
I
just
think
reading
somebody
his
from the
text
department
messages.
needs to start working their way down here. We might as well get anybody from, yeah, it's, I think Christy, nope, Elise Bailey's coming down. So, yeah, Brian, come on up. I mean, let's do that. So, Senator Fate moves the A1 amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Senator Abler to.
Well, I mean, it's a great amendment. You might have just said what it did. It pays for.
Yes.
It pays for the rate. It pays for the whatever increment each employer has had to pay, which Senator Pappas, I believe, is actually up to 2%. Could be as low as nothing if they already have this in their work, and maybe some of the SEIU people already have this in their contracts, which would be nice. So anyway, I think, and there is a substantial cost to this, which I think absolutely the Senate should bear. The state should bear. If we're going to do this, we don't want to put any of these providers at a disposition, at a risk. But just to point out what's sitting there in front of me is the impact on every other business in Minnesota that doesn't have this is also going to be a comparable amount. And this isn't the committee for small business, but there's a lot of small businesses in my district, and they're barely making payroll. And they would love to do all they can do, but given COVID and rates and pricing that they can't keep up with, they can't always raise their rates to match inflation. And so this is going to be a hit on them, and just so we understand what we're doing. And for that reason, have concerns about the bill as a whole. In terms of this part, for our work here, I commend Senator Fate for this amazing amendment that he moved. You put a lot of work in on this, and Senator Hoffman for whatever incidental work you've done on that, besides Senator Fate's strong leadership. So,
Mr. Chairman.
thank you for that.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Senator Abler, I appreciate your concern, but I did want to just say that it is 48 hours a year, which is 6 days a year, and, most businesses probably are already offering, week to 2 weeks a year, so it really is a pretty minimal request. You think people are probably going to get sick or have a child that's sick at least 6 days a year.
Yeah, and to that point, Senator Pappas, if I may, and I'm going to go to Senator Rasmussen. I had said this one to somebody was saying, well, minimal, and I said, yeah, it is. Let me remind you how much, our rate reimbursements, the only way these folks get their money is if we give them the money. And, we're up here, we scrambled. The 5% campaign gave people 25 cents an hour more, and it's just like, even if it's minimal, it's still, that industry, it's unique, because it's the caregiver bucket side of it. So, yeah, I get that, and I think we had done the math. I just said 3%. It's actually 2% is what we did. So, but I'm not, again, regardless of what it is, the fact is that that money needs to be paid from somebody else. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple questions, and first for the bill author. It's my understanding that I think in the second year, does it go up to 80 hours per year in terms of the amount of leave?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Pappas.
No, there was the opportunity to carry over 32 years from the previous year, 32 hours from the previous year to add to the 48 hours, but that can only be carried over to the next year. So the same thing would happen the year after that. So it would still, if you used up, let's say, your 80 hours during that second year, then it would revert back to the 48 hours.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you. Yeah, so the maximum you could have in 1 year would be 80 hours under the bill. Thank you for explaining that, Senator Pappas.
And that's only with the carryover.
Senator Pappas.
Got it.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. An additional question, because this is a similar approach that we took in this committee to the paid family medical leave bill, where we're trying to make sure that the providers are being made whole, or at least partially made whole.
Yep.
And Mr. Chair, my question is, are the costs of both this bill when it relates to human services and for paid family medical leave, will that go against this committee's target, or how is that going to work? And I just wonder if you could provide the committee with some insight on that.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. It is our desire that this does not get charged against our committee target, that it's being paid from somebody else. I think, does that make it clear? Because that's what our desire has been from the very get-go. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I think that does make sense. I just want to make sure that the cost of a couple of these bills aren't, being taken away from a lot of the other priorities that this committee has been hearing and talking about over the past few weeks.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. And to that point, I think we've been pretty clear about if it's X amount of dollars, that X amount of dollars, which could have been, right, and not, this is just saying who's going to pay for it. It's not saying that X amount of dollars that could have been spent on some service, OTPT, speech language, whatever it is, right, that department, because we scrapple for everything we can, or perhaps maybe pay for, I don't know, a licensing person under 245D so people don't have to wait 18 months, right? I mean, because you guys are just overstretched and under capacity. You need people to do that kind of stuff. And it's like that money is coming from someplace else and not coming from what would have traditionally been, we would have taken and sent it to you. We just want to make it clear that that's never used on a forecast, or not a forecast. This is where I start getting lost, but into the fact it's not going to be charged against this committee's target. Does that make sense? Thank you. I got, yes. So I think we're all in the sense. Senator Utke, we got a head shake. That makes sense. So, Senator Utke.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I saw the head shake, but I wanted to say don't get fooled, because if it's money to long-term care providers, whoever that comes out of the bucket of appropriations from this committee, that can't be separated. That's part of reimbursement. So this is going to be included. I don't see how it can't be.
So that's interesting. We had this debate last night. Senator Abler and I were headed to by the way, there's Partners in Policymaking, Class 40, that is done. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the DD Act, but they established it. You know, every state has a Developmental Disabilities Council. And then Dr. Colleen Wick put up these partners, Partners in Policymaking, which is now international. And Class 40 is now this year. And they're actually, folks are here today. So if you get visited by people from Partners in Policymaking, make sure you say hi and do your thing. So remember the discussion last night, Senator Abler, this very topic came up about how I just don't want it to be taken from the bucket of money, right, that should be providing services for grandpa and grandma and for people that desperately need it, right? And to that point, you know, what was that one president, he said, fool me once, shame on me or something, fool me twice. And then he paused and he said, don't be fooled again. He ended up quoting some musician on that one, right, Senator Hutke? So
Mr.
help,
Chairman.
help me out, Senator Pappas.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
Yeah,
Got
thank
it
you.
backwards.
No, it's,
Mr. Chairman, I did want to get back to the point of the bill, though, is as we talk about earn sick and save time, I think that's also a workforce issue, is that now when workers actually can choose where they're going to work, the idea that they have that as a kind of normal benefit, that they're going to have sick time off, as well as competitive wages. I think these are all, as well as another bill I'm carrying, Secure Choice, which is a pension program for low-wage workers. I mean, I think these are all things that we need to, paid family leave, all things we need to be providing for today's workforce and
so
family.
Senator Pappas, absolutely, we are getting back to the piece, but I just want to make it very clear, this committee doesn't want to see that money being charged against our targeted for services that are there, right? You know, does that, and if I'm not making sense, someone's going to have to help me explain that in better detail, because it seems the more I talk, the more people get confused on it. Yes, we all want to see this happen, but I don't want it to be charged against the bucket of services that we provide. Does that make sense? Senator Fate, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Senator Pappas, and thank you, Mr. Chair. This might surprise you, but I support your bill. Try not to fall out of your chair, Senator Pappas. But
Welcome to our committee, Senator Pappas.
But I also do agree that from what we've been hearing from our providers, that they're already struggling to pay their workers a livable wage, and a whole host of other issues that they're going through, that the state should cover this. We shouldn't be burdening our providers with this, so I do agree with that. But I still see this also as a good deal. I apologize, my voice is still hoarse, but I also do see this as a good deal for all of our providers, because going through the notes and going through the bill, I think you said that business owners reported less turnover, meaning there's less costs associated with training new individuals, right? So if they don't have to pay for that, that's a savings for the provider. That's also a good deal. Also, we wouldn't want to see any of our workers going in sick and caring for our elderly or our folks that need help the most. I think that would be even worse. So I do support the amendment, Senator Abler's amendment, and I appreciate you carrying this, Senator Pappas.
Senator Pappas, Senator Abler.
Well, thank you. And to the discussion about whose target is going to be nicked by this, my suggestion is, even though I don't get to go to the meetings, Senator Pappas, you get to go to those meetings, is that this seems to be like a strong commitment on the part of the majority. And I think as such, it should be that strong of a commitment that it comes out of the top as something that they have to pay for, and the same as the paid family leave program. And so we can discuss, if we interviewed people, how much is this going to make a person stay on the job? But frankly, the issue is wages. That's the heart of it. And this is an incremental piece, and neither of us know how big, but it's certainly going to be a positive for the workers, and they would rather have this than not. And so the crisis that's brewing in the industries that we talked about, long-term care, home care, nursing homes, assisted livings, all that, is that they're short 50,000 workers, and what's going to draw them to stay. And the effort by Senator Hoffman and others to have a very strong target to actually address that in a meaningful way is quite expensive itself. And so if that would be diluted by, this is probably $100 million amendment or something we just added on, that would be just unfortunate. I do have Senator Fateh, to your amendment, is this pretty much everybody in the long-term care industry, nursing homes, group homes, assisted livings, home care, day services?
So Senator Abler, that the same, what our intent in this, and this is why there's still some need for technical assistance, because we had, the question I threw to the group was, look, there's still some technical assistance that's needed from the department to help flush that out, because remember the conversation we had under long-term care, we had two different, we wanted to address that same piece here, and yet we still need Ms. Bailey.
I can ask her a question.
I think Ms. Bailey's right here, maybe, that's a question.
So, Ms. Bailey, could you just, what you're getting is a sense of the committee and the will of the author. And thank you, Senator Pappas, for supporting this idea. I think it's awesome. And so could you, and just I'm going to offer one thought and then I'll ask you a question. So on line 1.17 talks about additional costs to employers for direct care workers earn sick and safe time. So that may actually include the cost of the extra service. They may have to pay a premium to replace these people that they can't. So could you just comment on, Ms. Bailey, upon what you, Mr. Chair and Ms. Bailey, about what you see, like what people do you think are included in this based on your judgment, and just could you comment about that, please, and whatever is related to that?
Ms. Bailey.
Mr. Chair, Senator Abler, I think generally under subdivision 1, it sounds like the intent is to cover all of the services one would think about as included in long-term care. But that would be part of the technical assistance in making sure that the law is really clear on what services would be impacted. And then the point you picked out under subdivision 2, we'd really want to put it within the rate methodologies in law, what the impact would be, to make the law crystal clear on how those rates would be modified.
Thanks.
Senator Abler.
And so I can imagine that there's some firms that will have no impact at all because they already do this and they've got it baked into their nursing homes, got it baked in, they already have it, so they get paid later for it. Mr. Chair, what about NEMT? Do you see that in this as well, the transportation side?
You know, Senator Abler, I think, do you remember, Ms. Bailey, when we had, because we had that first amendment was like, well, what about if they were part-time this or part-time that, or what if, right? There's the what if questions were out there. Did we, in the technical assistance from paid family medical leave, when we took the second amendment, was part of the TA that you're doing fiscally to look at that, was the non-emergency medical transportation providers part of that conversation? I want to say yes. Does that seem right to you?
Chair Hoffman, I would have to get back to you. If that should be part of the technical assistance, we can make sure it is.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Mr. Chair.
I think, Senator Abel, I think so. I think in that second amendment under the two, because home and HCBS that's our second amendment that we ended up doing. It was home and community-based services providers, right? I went to the catch-all to then the focus, and I think they were still included in that, and that's part of the technical assistance that you have somebody else getting that for you. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, yes, and Ms. Grom could probably come up and maybe talk more in detail about that.
No. As long as the thing I think for us, as long as you understand our intent is to protect those that the only way they get paid is when the state of Minnesota gives them more money, right?
Right.
And that's it.
And Mr. Chair, yeah, that's exactly why we want to provide the technical assistance rather than having a large bucket term in the law, to make it really clear that the way we'll implement it is the way intended.
Sounds good. Senator Abler.
I just have a question and then just one short comment and then I'm done. And I appreciate the fact that it's here. On line 13.4, based on the context of our committee, a home care employer who doesn't submit records will be charged $10,000. The old law was $1,000. So, Senator, I said home care because that's our topic here. It could be anybody. Do you know, Senator Pappas, why a $1,000 fine for most people is a lot? Do you think that people just are going to refuse, or why do you need 10,000?
Senator Pappas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, this is a DLI request. It's for kind of repeated offenses. It's not just for a first-time offense. And Mr. Elliott actually wanted to comment as well.
Brian Elliott from SEIU, welcome to the committee. State your name and how many years you've been at SEIU, and I'm kidding. Just welcome, Mr.
Well,
Elliott.
my
Good
whole
to see you.
CV.
Good to see you again. Nice welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brian Elliott with the Service Employees International Union, Minnesota State Council. I don't believe the Department of Labor and Industry is here today, so what I think I can do is address the question based on what they have testified in previous hearings, which is that, and this one is specifically for, okay. So on 13.4, that is for essentially the refusal to submit records to DLI for around an investigation. This is not a whoops, we didn't keep records. This is a willful refusal to submit records to the department in order to stymie an investigation. The other important piece that they have mentioned in past hearings is that the, if you look at, I'm trying to find the exact line for you, 13.7 through 13.9 in the bill constrain the department's ability, this is a maximum first, but it does constrain the department's ability based on the size of the employer and the severity of the infraction. And they, according to their fiscal note, only offer or only incur any penalty at all in less than 2% of their investigations. And so this is, according to their previous testimony, intended to be a maximum, and they're constrained by this as well as part of Chapter 14 that limits penalties based on a number of factors.
Thank you, Mr.
This is, Senator Abler, what do you think? This is judiciary now? You're going to start getting into 177.32 subdivision 1 and do the,
I'm in subdivision 2, Mr. Chair.
The right thing. Oh.
So, just to, these are
I love it.
our stable of places, or some places.
I was trying to be funny, Senator
Oh, I'm
Abler, on the
sorry.
judiciary,
Senator Hoffman, that was very funny.
Thank you. That was just, jeez.
But anyway, and so I'm just mentioning it now, and I'm going to actually just mention it again as I read the section. And so on line 13.5, it says for each repeated. And so, Senator Pappas, you're a really good author, and I know you're going to just think about this. And so, what happens is we put penalties in place, and then people are deathly afraid they're going to get this big penalty, and it's really going to be nothing. And they don't know there's 2%. And so it's just, there's a certain amount of terror that happens to people who are waiting to get the thing in the mail, and the thing will come out. You could be fined up to $10,000 and all that. So, so I think my point is the average home care place, that's what, since we're in this committee, tries to comply. They go out of their way to comply with everything DHS wants and whomever. So, and then just finally, just a comment to the bill, a little bit beyond the scope of the hearing here, but at some point, it would be interesting to see how many businesses in the state truly offer this. I know the big ones all do. I know the bulk of the small businesses in my district do not. They're just barely staying open. And so 2%, the most a company can be affected is probably 2% because of the 3% and the cap and all that, or 3 hours, or 1 hour per 30. But that's a significant amount for some of these places, and it's cash. They're going to be having to bear it. So it's not inconsequential, and I'm not asking you to debate me, and I know there's a lot of benefit to it, but the downside is some of these small companies that are just doing their best to treat their staff the best they can, themselves earning a very meager income. So thank you very much.
Senator Utke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you would be disappointed if I didn't ask. I heard the reference to a fiscal note made just a little bit ago. And I do, you know, in the back page, we've got a lot of expenses spelled out, but is that all inclusive? Or should we expect additional expenses related to this bill through a fiscal note?
So Senator Pappas, one thing you know, Senator Utke is our fiscal hawk on this committee, so that was, that hence the reference you would be, always finds that. So where are we at with fiscal notes, fiscal stuff? Senator
Mr. Chairman, I don't
Pappas?
know if the committee was provided with a fiscal note. I have one that doesn't have a date on it, but I believe it's the final one. And it's, the fiscal cost is mostly with the Department of Labor and Industry for them to enforce the law.
Senator Utke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Pappas, if you've got a fiscal note in front of you, we didn't get one in our packets as an example in the bill where it shows $1,445,000. That's just the top number to the Department of Labor and Industry. Is that what the fiscal note represents also?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I believe so.
So those are the only costs you think, Senator, that are, interesting. Usually there's an XXX someplace in there and we're waiting on it, but this, it looks up pretty all intact for you, Senator. Is that, am I missing something?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I thought that comes up too is these look like costs to get the proposed system up and running, including changing a time clock or time recording system or whatever, even in the house. But there would be ongoing costs to the state because of this, you know, there's got to be more than just the initial setup, and I don't see any of that.
Senator Utke, yeah, it looks like that last 18.3, there's the word "and beyond." What was the movie? Infinity and Beyond. There was the "and beyond." I think that's ongoing. Is that fiscal year 2026 and beyond? Senator Mann.
Mr. Chairman,
Well, I got that. It was Toy Story. Senator Pappas, help
Mr.
us.
Chairman, Mr. Elick wanted to address this.
Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senator Utke. The fiscal note, so this bill has been passed by the other body, sorry, to make the reference, 3 times in as many years. And so the fiscal note has been written and rewritten as the bill has changed, but the numbers in the bill do match exactly the fiscal note. And the bulk of the costs are for the Department of Labor and Industry around the enforcement, the staffing, ongoing staffing for the department to do enforcement. The setup costs are the smaller piece of that.
Senator Utke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that. And so that takes care of the financial part. Are we getting close to the end of it where we want comments on the bill at this point? Or?
Yeah, Senator, I think the desire is we need to, if all of our stuff is satisfied regarding the technical assistance from the Department of Human Services, I mean, we're still going to be watching, you know, to make sure that that stuff looks the way that we're protecting for the folks that we do care about here. So I think Senator Utke, you know, absolutely. If you want to, Senator Pappas, I'm ready to, you know, roll the. I think you guys. What's the next stop for you, Senator Pappas?
Finance, Mr. Chairman.
Finance. So Senator Utke, if you want to, we can either motion to do it, and you can have final thoughts. If people are leaving, you don't want to leave. We got 3 more bills that are coming up. Mitchell, Morrison, and Bolin. This is going to be some great conversations here. So,
yeah,
Senator Utke.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is my only chance to weigh in on this along its route, and just for thoughts that.
Go ahead.
I see it as a horrible bill. Mandating these restrictions or demands against our small businesses. It's been mentioned earlier, a lot of our bigger businesses and actually a lot of our smaller businesses. I offered benefits in my small business that exceeded what's here. So the benefit itself was not a problem to people like that. The fact that you've got somebody looking over your shoulder that you're doing this and the threat of a fine, that is unacceptable. But we have a lot of smaller businesses than that operate with part-time. Even they hire people 1 day a week. Over time, they're going to add up to be more than 30 hours, and they're going to have to start to take care of these things and take these into consideration. Those are the people that this really hurts. And we're going to give these small businesses, some of them can't move, but we give them more and more reasons to pick up their tent and move out of Minnesota. And this is another thing. You know, I did it myself. You know, you had vacation time and you had sick time. You combined it and you called it PTO, so that as an employer, you have a little more consistency to it. If a person is sick, yes, you get the call at 7 o'clock in the morning that says, I can't come in, and that's fully understandable. But the days they want to take off that they can schedule, they would let the employer know you have a chance to get other staff in and cover those down hours. When it's recorded as sick time, and some people would never use it that way. Others, if I've got 5 days of sick time this year, I know people that use every last day every year, you know, with the old system. But they call in at 8 in the morning and say, I'm not going to be there today, I'm sick. Well, they're, you know, opening a fishing season and opening a deer hunting season are great days to be sick, and we see that a lot. And I'm trying not to keep that burden off of our employers, because they got to be open every day. They need people there. The people are our most valuable asset in a small business, but it's a working relationship between that manager or owner and the employee, and we need to stay out of that relationship and let that relationship work. I see this as just something that's one more step to break that up and make it harder to do business in our state. And we're going to end up losing some more part-time jobs, because as an employer, you got to figure out how to work around the system or make the system work for you. And if it means changing how you do business just to get this off your back, you're going to have to do it. And that's what I'm afraid of. This is going to create more problems than benefits as I see it. Might be, everybody else got different opinions, but that's just the way I see it, that it's not good for us. So anyhow, when the vote comes and I don't support it, that is why. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
1 minute, Senator Pappas. Thank you, Senator Utke. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Senator Utke, just to clarify that if the employer offers PTO, that's at least the 6 days a year, then they've satisfied this legislation. So PTO is perfectly acceptable.
Senator Utke.
Right, thank you, and yeah, I saw that, but the threat of somebody still looking over your shoulder, and you know, is there a request for data, that fine is still there. You still have to play the game, but yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I would have more than qualified for the requirements of this bill in my business, but again, somebody's checking in on me.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to clarify
Excuse me,
also
just a
that.
second. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Pappas.
The Department of Labor doesn't have the capacity, really, or the desire to randomly check businesses to see if they're complying. It's really very much complaint-based. So if it's just like with other laws we have, that if somebody has a complaint about a workforce condition that isn't consistent with law, then they bring a complaint to the department. But so there's no kind of random looking over the shoulder of businesses.
I didn't know that. Senator Utke, did you know that?
Well, the fact that the
And McQuaid's
department
got.
and the state can still
Hold on,
look
Senator
over the
Utke.
shoulder, small business, people just don't like that.
Yeah.
And I fully hear it, that it's really random and the chance is really rare, but it's still there. So
Thank you.
anyhow, but thank you.
Thank you, Senator Utke. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Pappas. So we're going to go to Senator Mitchell and then Senator Aaron McQuaid, who joins us from the lovely town of Lakeville, right? If I get that right, make sure I got that right, Senator McQuaid, when you do come on, since apparently some rule has changed now. You have to say where you're from. Apple Valley, I got that wrong. Of course I did. Senator Mitchell, your bill is up next, by the way. So tell people not to go anywhere. They need to stick around so they can hear your bill.
Super exciting. Senator Pappas, I would like to thank you for bringing this today. I think this is so important, especially since we do not have medical leave. This, for example, yet, we're hoping to change that, but this, for example, could be the only way that a pregnant woman could take a couple days off after she has a child, which is just ridiculous to think about. But I would like to say, from my perspective, when I was a completely single person, I almost never used this. But now as a single parent, this is critical. This is, and I've worked for companies, big companies usually, some of which were great about these benefits, and some which would do things, even when they could afford it, like intentionally keeping people part-time to try and get around paying these benefits. So just for example, the longest leave I ever had to take of this was when I was part-time at one of the media companies in the Twin Cities that would not have paid this leave otherwise. And because Minneapolis-St. Paul had it, I was able to use it. And my premature foster baby, when he ended up in the hospital, this was what allowed me to take the 4 days off and sit in the hospital with him without having to worry that I would have a job to come back to or that I wouldn't be able to spend that time. And I think that when we don't have this leave, it so disparately hurts women, to be entirely honest. Because especially if there's a single parent situation, it's usually the moms that are taking care of the children, and then they have to make that balance between a sick kid or something else that is going on and being able to pay their bills or know that they have a job to come back to. And so not only is it the morally right thing to do to make sure people don't have to make that choice, but it's also the best interest of our economy in Minnesota because it means people can engage in our economy. They know that they can have a job and balance the family. And if we look at healthcare, that too is predominantly done by female employees. And so I think to support our workforce, this is just so critical to be able to give this benefit. I, unlike one of my esteemed colleagues, I don't think people abuse this. Yes, someone somewhere might, but people genuinely use this so that they're not going to work sick or so that they can take care of their family. And it's just the right thing for us to be doing for Minnesotans. So I appreciate you bringing this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mitchell. And Senator May Quaid, zooming in from
Thank
wonderful
you.
Apple Valley. Did we get that right, Senator May Quaid?
You did, yes, Apple Valley, because I have a child who's sick, double ear infection. You know, just to build on what Senator Mitchell was talking about, I spent many years working in the service industry, whether it was in a restaurant or in catering or in retail. And I remember there was a single mom that I worked with who she was sick and she came in for her shift because she couldn't afford to take a sick day off. I mean, she was a single mom who every paycheck was really, really important to them staying in their apartment. And she had norovirus and we all got sick. I mean, it was brutal. They had to close the restaurant for 3 days while everybody had to go through their system. And so what I want to remind folks is that the cost of not doing this is really, really high. And it is some of the ways in which we have foodborne illness outbreaks. It's some of the ways that we have outbreaks of some of the most contagious viruses that we have. And so the question isn't whether or not people will use this. The question is whether or not we want people to come to work sick or have paid time off when they are sick, because those are the choices that people are making. And so Senator Pappas, I want to thank you. I know you've been spearheading this for 10 years, and this is something that is so important to every worker, to our economy. And I'm just really grateful that we have the opportunity to have this conversation, particularly in this community where we're often talking about people who are immunocompromised or vulnerable to more serious medical complications from things like, a norovirus or from strep throat or things that might not be so scary to folks who aren't immunocompromised. So this is really important for this committee and really important for the state of Minnesota. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator May Quaid. The members. So Senator Pappas, so Senator Fate renews his motion to move House File, I can't believe I said House File 19 as amended to be re-referred and sent to Finance. That is correct? Senator Fate, is that correct on your motion? Yes. There you go. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign? No. It does pass. Thank you, Senator
Thank you,
Pappas.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Members, going to Senator Mitchell. Come on up. Senate File 2746. And then Senator Morrison, if she's not here, and Senator Bolden too, is Morrison then Bolden. But Senator Mitchell, information collected in long-term care surveys modifications. We do not have an amendment, so.
And I see Senator Morrison already in the wings.
There she is. Senator, welcome to your committee.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. So Senate File 2746 is an assisted living report card update. Simple but important policy bill to support the department's responsibilities for the assisted living facility report card project. The updates in the bill are necessary to ensure consumers in the state will have information they need to make the best choice possible for needs and circumstances, should they ever require assisted living. And just a little background, in 2019, the legislator provided funding to the department to support the development of an assisted living report card. It includes resident and family surveys in addition to a website. So the two changes that we are offering to that already existing bill today, the first one would allow the commissioner to obtain upon request aggregate de-identified resident demographic information, and the second would ensure providers' participation in those surveys. And I have a testifier with me if we need more information, or, yeah, it's up to you.
So, thank you. Members, any questions for the good senator? Could you, your department, yeah. Why the change? Why the change in subdivision 3C? It's why the change, but yet it's not, it's not, what's the word? Senator Matthews, you're non-permissive, what's it? It's must and should, what is it called?
Permissive.
Thank you. This is a permissive, that's a permissive statement, yet you're making the change, but it's a permissive statement. Can you help me understand why is that?
Senator Hoffman, Nicole Stockert with the Department of Human Services. I'm looking at C3 and.
So I think you mean, Mr. Chair, I think you mean D is the part that says now that they must participate. Was that your question?
No, if you look at, so we're making changes to demographic information and consumer surveys for HCBS providers, right? And the new language that you add in beginning in 1.10, right? We de-identified demographic information, and then you look down to 1.11, the commissioner may request, right? So may request, does that necessarily mean that I must? I mean, so I get a little confused because we already have an industry that's like, what's more paperwork? Are you putting more paperwork on something? Then it's more of I think it's more of that global question on, so what are we trying to do here? And it's permissive yet not permissive. Did I say that right, Senator Matthews? So, thank you. So, does that help clarify it for you? Thanks.
Absolutely does. Thank you, Senator Hoffman. Thank you for the question. So essentially, I think what this is probably coming down to is we intend to survey every single assisted living facility, I believe, by the end of this year. But right now, what we're running into is some of the smaller providers, we have issues with, small numbers. So we haven't quite worked out all of the data privacy questions yet that we have for some of these smaller providers. So we may not end up requesting these for all providers if we run into complications with, using too small of a numbers depending upon the size of the facility.
So,
Is that helpful?
No, it gets it. Now my head goes on to, so Senator Fate, Senator Abler, this is the conversation at the end of last year, so this now makes sense. Some of the smaller providers, those that used to be housing with services, now they're group home providers, now they're this. Is this going to feel the same way as saying you got to have a commercialized kitchen in your house? I mean, I'm still trying to wrap my arms around. We know we need to do the surveys. We have to do the surveys, right? I guess I'm just trying to wrap my arms around that piece, especially when it's, Senator Fate brought this, the issue of the 144G. I mean, just all that whole transition stuff, right? And Senator Abler, actually, I'll never forget the conversation 3 years ago about, somebody he met at a Menards and talking about a group home in such a way that started the conversation. So I hope I'm making sense on that aspect. So thanks, Nicole. Senator Abler, did you want to ask?
Well, thanks. I was kind of dozing here doing my other work, and I decided to read the bill. And I appreciate the intent of the department. I think this is really private information that people may not want to give up. And I'm not sure they want to give it up without being clearly given an informed consent. I mean, if you look at, pick any one. Age, maybe that's in the records. Their race. I don't think that's any of Department of Human Services business. And if I want to conceal my particular race of whatever it may be, why are you going to just demand that ethnicity and gender identity? We've heard nothing this session except for discussions about that and how people are being treated poorly for their perception about how people look at that demographic group. And now we're going to identify it in their records and mail it into DHS without the consent of the client. So this is not a minor bill, with all respect. And Senator Mitchell, hey, carry our bill, sure. I don't imagine you thought of this. You're just being nice. But this bill is not ready to go. This needs to, this data, if this goes to judiciary, it's not going to be a good meeting because they're going to ask, what are you going to do with it? And where's Mr. Neumeister when you want him?
Do you know where this is going? Is this going? Yeah, where's?
I don't know. But I don't think, I think you need to think through what you're trying to do with this information. So, Senator Mitchell, is this your project or?
So, no.
Senator Mitchell, yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, no, I was asked to carry this, but I will say, an individual, just like any other survey, you are not required to answer these questions. If you don't want to answer these questions, they can ask the facility to conduct the surveys, but no person ever has to answer a question. I would also say, I helped with the census a couple years ago, and so things like race and ethnicity, one of the things that we were looking at with the census was, are we providing, let's say there's a certain ethnic group in an area that might want particular services within wherever they're staying. Are we providing the best level of services for a specific community that you might be able to identify if people are saying, most of the people in this particular area are, for example, of Somali descent. And, they might want specific services, then we could better identify an area that might want a specific type of service. But no one is required to answer just like any other check in the box
Mr.
question.
Senator Abler, yeah.
Well, you don't need subdivision 3C. If you want to include the 144G people, then fine that, I guess. But this doesn't say, Senator Mitchell, what you just said. This says that the commissioner may request. And I will give you a clue. After sitting through this committee for any amount of time, when the commissioner may request something, they send it. It's not like a may, would you mind sending us some information? Like it's a request. So the commissioner requests. The commissioner may or may not request, but once they request, there is like all hell to pay if it doesn't get sent. And we just talked about a $10,000 fine on the last bill if they didn't submit some information. So that's the pressure these places feel. And not only it says, give us their contact information, it says, by the way, tell us their personal identity information and give it to us. And if the department wants to ask people what they are about all those particular demographic things, then they can put that in the little survey that they're going to send out to them. I just think this is
So does this,
very invasive.
well, to your point, Senator Abler and Ms. Stockert, does this, is this all home and community-based services providers or just those under 144G?
Chair Hoffman and Senator Abler, I really appreciate you asking these questions because I think it's really important that the committee understands exactly what the intent of this bill is and what exactly that we're asking for here. So I would, if you don't mind, I would like to invite our expert here to kind of answer this question a little bit more in detail.
Who's your expert?
Good afternoon, members of the committee. I'm Rachel Shands. I'm the Home and Community-Based Services Manager in the Aging and Adult Services Division at DHS, and my team is responsible for implementing the assisted living report card. So thank you for asking these questions about this bill. To the most recent question, the providers that are in scope are all licensed assisted living facility providers, licensed under 144G. And to the question about the de-identified demographic information that we're proposing to add here to this statute. Right now, we are conducting surveys, as you know, and so we have folks going out to these facilities to survey folks. We do ask some demographic information as part of that survey. So those folks who are being surveyed, we do gather self-reported demographic information. What we're asking to do here is permission to ask providers to give us some aggregate demographic information so that we can, understand if the folks who are responding to the survey are representative of everybody that's at that facility, because not everybody might agree to participate in the survey, and so without this, we aren't able to tell if the folks who respond are representative. It also just supports our ability to do, equity analysis and understand just the demographic differences between different types of providers, again, at the aggregate facility level. So providers are not providing any individually identifiable data about age, race, ethnicity, or gender identity. It's at the aggregate level to the extent that they collect it, because there is not a standardized format necessarily that providers are using.
Currently, there isn't one, correct?
Correct.
All right.
That assisted living providers are
I want to go
using.
to Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And even before Senator Abler started speaking, my old hat I wore for 2 years at civil law and data privacy, those alarm bells were going off on Section 1. And comments are made, are we understanding exactly what's being asked? I think we are understanding it, and I think the question some of us are asking is, I don't think you have the need to be asking the questions in the first place, especially trying to hook it through the provider to the residents that isn't being done in the discussions you have with the residents directly. And I do see Mr. Neumeister has now entered the building, which is
You make it sound like Elvis has just gotten in the building on this one. Welcome. This is great conversation, you guys. Seriously, this is like, the light bulb goes off. It's like, well, what does this mean? We know what we need to do because it's never been done, right? But it's like, but what could potentially that mean to do? And maybe it's utilizing the experts here to, fine tune the language so that we're all happy at the end of the day. I think, what's the intent of this? Are we going to hold it here, or are we moving this on? Nicole, what do you want to do with this? I mean, what's the...
Chair Hoffman, yeah. So we've been working with the imperative as well to sort of address, they are part of the stakeholder advisory group that really is the reason why the department was bringing forward these changes to begin with.
Okay.
But we did get some feedback from them even today, and in fact, they're happy with it. So I think we still are in conversations about this. Essentially, the intent is, to your point, people choose not to participate in consumer surveys. They may choose not to participate in the family surveys. So what this would do is, we know how your licensed capacity,
Yep.
right? We don't know what's your occupancy without the provider? How full are you? Who are the residents that are there at a very, at an aggregate level? So it kind of provides a denominator of, really high level breakdowns of the facility to sort of know, like, okay, so if we got, 100 responses back, but there's 150 people there, then we know that we only captured 100,
Yeah,
two-thirds
no,
of
I
the
get
entire
it.
facility, and we kind of know of the
Yep.
people that responded and provided us that information, how it sort of reflects in the residents of the entire facility.
So let's go to Senator Abler, or do you want to follow up, or you want to go?
Yeah,
I'm going to go Abler, Utke,
I'll
Fate.
finish briefly, Mr. Chair.
Yep, go ahead,
I
Senator
appreciate
Matthews.
that. I still have questions about whether the categories you're asking for get so far into the weeds that you're no longer able to make it aggregate and de-identified, that you've gone too far. You can say that, but you're asking too far to be able to back that up. And I would like to hear feedback on that if Mr. Newmeister gets a minute. Anytime the privacy bat signal goes off, Mr. Newmeister miraculously shows up in the room, Mr. Chair. It's great.
That's funny.
So otherwise, Section 2 and Section 1 seem to be covering two different things, and maybe
Yep.
Section 2 should be debated on its own. And I'm not ready to say, let's move Section 1 out of the bill too. Maybe we need to X one of them out and figure it out separately.
I mean, so to that point, Senator Matthews, yeah, Senator 2, Section 2, clearly that assisted living facilities licensed must participate in surveys. That's a given, right? I mean, this is now saying all those must be, but it's the real issue is about what we're trying to do in that Section 1 piece of it. So, yeah, I hear you on that, and maybe we should just lay this over, keep it working and then all the people, and I still got to get to Abler, Utke, and Fate in this. Look what you did. This is great, Nicole. You bring a bill that, it's good conversation. So, Senator Abler?
Well, thank you. And I just want to help how I read this. And I understand why you might want the information. Just because the department wants information doesn't mean that they get it. And it's nice to know. And you have 100 out of 150. That's actually pretty good. We've already given the authority to do these surveys and send them to people. And some people just don't want to participate. They want to be invisible. They just don't want any part of any about them being known. They want to live quietly in their assisted living. And they don't. Some of them don't vote because they don't want to be in a jury. I mean, all kinds of reasons they just want to be left alone. But so just if you can imagine how this is going to be implemented. So the commissioner may request, and so now you're requesting, and that feels like it's a big impact that they have to do. And so now you have to have somebody at the clipboard going around saying, hi, we have a new survey request. Can you tell me about you? And now this is in their records, and I just don't think it's been thought through. And I haven't thought so much about all these topics until this year happened. And every committee has something to do with more equity and something. And by the way, and now we're going to publish it in some kind of survey. And so this information is not going to be private, probably. And I'm just telling you. So, I mean, you need some kind of warning or informed thing. And anyway, so I'll stop. You've already heard my point, and I'm just very concerned. I mean well by you guys, but thank you.
Senator Utke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as the conversation goes on, a number of the things I was going to say have been covered. Thank you, Senator Abler and Matthews, on that. But actually, as I read it, Sections 1 and 2 go together with this new language, and Section 1 makes Section 2 relevant to that, as in, if you read it that way anyhow, because in Section 1, you're bringing in or specifying the assisted living facilities. And my question on Section 1 was, what if the provider refuses to answer and provide these replies or consumer surveys? And then you go to Section 2 and you go on the bottom and it says assisted living facilities must participate. So it took out the option of may provide, am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, that was the question, it must or may thing through, that was kind of what did it. So Ms. Stockert, or Ms. Rachel?
Chair Hoffman, Senator Aki. So there are two separate issues in the bill here. And so starting with Section 2 and Subdivision 3D, this is where we are proposing to make participation in the survey process required by providers. So right now, it is voluntary, it's occurring, we're going out, we're requesting participation. Most providers are participating, but some are declining. So what participation involves is, under current law, providers are providing the contact information of the residents and key associated, their representatives to the department. That's under current law and how this program is structured. And then we have a contractor who's going out and then surveying residents at the facility. Residents can decline to be surveyed. But that's under the current program. So we are proposing under Section 2 to make that a required participation so that we can have better information to provide, to the public, so that we've got all providers participating. The first section of the bill is proposing to add an element where providers, if they collect this information, if they have it, that they would provide us at an aggregate level demographic information about the folks living at their facility. And I would note also that whatever we're doing, regarding these surveys and working with providers, this all is approved by our DHS Institutional Review Board, which looks very closely at privacy and provides direction on how we're to administer this survey to ensure we are accounting for people's rights and privacy in this design.
No,
So-
thank you for that clarification, Ms. Strand. So Senator Ecke, follow up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, that's why I brought it up, because that's what I saw it doing was the Section 2 made it a must for Section 1. They still have that option, but again, the expansion of this survey is extremely concerning, and that's where I have a great problem. You've called it a report card, whatever, but to me it's super intrusive. DHS has no business going down this path as I see it, and that's where I would have problems with what's here, because I think it's way overboard. I know when my parents reached the age of when we moved them into assisted living and then final step of a nursing home, it was myself and my brothers that took care of those applications and things to fill out. I know where this would have stopped. It would have stopped before it ever started on a survey like that. And I think there's a lot of people like that. It's beyond the type of care we were setting up for them. It's no different than when I go to a doctor today. There's questions they ask you. There's questions I don't answer because it doesn't have anything to do with health care. I think this is beyond the scope of assisted living too. So just my take on this.
So just one of the things we do know, and I think we'll probably do is because there's some other questions that pop up, but I know it's aggregate data, so the names are not, they're identifiable. It's just aggregate data that's there. But I think to your point, Senator Ecke, the care providers also are going to work. I think what we should just do with this bill is lay it over and just let it work its way, and then when we put our hats together on it, then everybody's happy at the end of the day. I mean, is that, and then we'll go to Senator Wickman after you,
Mr. Chair,
Senator
just
Ecke.
one thing when you mentioned the aggregate data, even if it's data collected on a form and put in the back of their file cabinet after they consolidate this monthly or whatever, it's still a form in their possession. I have a problem with that.
No, and I appreciate you for saying that. So Senator Wickland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say, I hope we don't lose sight of the fact that, that this came about because of people being concerned about quality and their experiences of people in assisted living facilities, and so I wouldn't want to not do a survey so that we find another way to not help families understand the quality of our facilities. So if there can be more discussion about the wording and whether it's actually protective enough, I can see that discussion, but I wouldn't want to lose track of the fact that a few years ago we had many people concerned about not being able to tell the care quality of settings, and we need to address that. I mean, I think providers we should be able to see information about facilities in an aggregate way to help people make choices about where they have their loved ones living. So I wouldn't want to lose track of that. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. Here's a couple points, then we'll just lay this over unless anybody else wants to add it in. So something to think about, and maybe you guys want to note this down. Subdivision 3C, the thing that got me was surveys for home and community-based services, period, right? That means all HCBS. It's just that statement in and of itself. So you might want to think about clarifying that up, because when we're looking at the very bottom, hey, look at Nicole Stockard shaking her head yes. When you're looking at the bottom, when we're talking about assisted living, because this is our assisted living, to all the senators' points, assisted living here, right? And so specifically on the quality of peace. And so you might want to look at that. And then there needs to be some other stuff in there, like line 1.13, after the word provider. If you really wanted to make this, as you guys are having this conversation, maybe think about putting the words when requested. Now that's permissive. There you go, Senator Matthews. How's that for lawyer speak? And then, the information, instead of contact, that following, instead of, it should be contact information maybe, as instead of demographic, it should be contact. I don't know. It's just something that, as you and the care providers and the rest of the folks are doing this, maybe think about how to summarize or fix that up a little bit. So, Senator Matthews.
To your point, with the word must on line 1.2, that still is going to trump your proposed addition in that statement. So the whole sentence should get looked at in context with the change.
I know, I love that. See? So good idea, just got put another good idea. So, to your notes, Ms. Stockert, maybe that's something. Any other? God, I feel like we're in judiciary, gentlemen, and here we are. I know that's not funny. That was funny, judiciary. Let's lay this over. Senator Mitchell, thank you for doing this. These are great conversations. I mean, this is a system we're trying to help.
Can I give one quick story before we end?
You can give all the stories you can, you bet.
So I do think some of this information is important. I wouldn't have carried it otherwise. My parents decided to try like a senior living community probably 5 or 6 years ago. And once they got in there, I think my stepdad was 62 or 63 at the time. It wasn't until they bought and were moved in that he was like, I think the average age here is like 80. And he found out he had no one his age to like hang out with. So that didn't go well for them. They only lasted a couple of years and they moved out. So I do think in terms of both having a report card for how things are going, but just to give people kind of an idea of like what that specific community might be like in terms of age or in terms of, other things in that community, it can help some people make a decision as to where might be the best fit for them. So I do think there's value in this information. Thanks.
Thank you. You know what somebody just said to me? Can I go back on something? We're going to lay this over. Thank you very much, Senator, and then we'll get Senator Morrison up here. The last bill, we did adopt the FATE amendment, didn't we? And we did pass that. Okay, I just want to make sure that we're clear. I absolutely thought we did that. So it's amazing, FATE. Somebody asked the question, did we? I think we adopted it. No, we did adopt it. Senator Morrison.
Mr. Chair.
Tara Erickson, Liz Young, come on up to the front. Come on, we don't sit there. What do you think this is? Wait and wait and wait. Come on, let's go. Welcome to the committee, Senator Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have an A2 amendment.
You do. let's pass that out. Who wants to move the good Senator's A2 amendment? And then she could, Senator Mann, Senator Dr. Mann. You know how many doctors we have in this room? This is pretty cool. Senator Mann, Senator Morrison, you want to tell us about your A2 amendment as it passes out, unless you want Senator Mann to talk about the A2 amendment?
Mr. Chair, the A2 clarifies who is on the task force, period.
It's getting handed out still. I like the fact that you added lived experience, 2 members who identify who have lived, Native American Indian, who have lived experience with the child welfare system and substance use. That's lived. We need to see more and more of that. Are we sure? We otherwise we make decisions in this bubble, in this bowl, but where are the people that with the lived experience that can say to us, yeah, this was good, but your system really wasn't so good over here, right? And then we got to be honest enough to say, you know, yeah, let's do something to change it. So I'm glad to see that. So that's really nice. Any other questions for the good senator? Senator Mann renews her motion for the A2 amendment. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Uh-oh. I need to go to school here just a second. Mr. Monahan.
Members, Senator Morrison, there's a mistake in the amendment on page 1, line 9. It currently reads 2 members from the.
Yeah, it does.
So we need to strike the first from and the first the.
Mr. Chair,
Senator Rasmussen.
I move to reconsider the amendment,
I
or have it voted.
didn't drop the gavel. I got to I didn't pound it, so I consider, we can reconsider it. Do you think? Is that what we need to do?
I would then, if the amendment's still before us, I would move to amend the amendment per council's recommendation.
Senator Rasmussen moves that, so all those in favor with Senator Rasmussen's amendment to the amendment, did I get that right? Indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. There, did I hit that gavel? Did we get it? So thank you. Mr. Monahan, does that clean it up? Thank you, Senator Mayquade, for your aye from Apple Valley. Senator Morrison, keep going. Tell us about what you got.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Monahan, and thank you, Senator Rasmussen, for correcting the amendment. Mr. Chair, members, thank you for considering Senate File 2139, a bill to create a task force to establish uniform guidelines for supporting pregnant women with substance use disorder. This bill builds on progress the legislature made 2 years ago when we made some needed changes to our state's mandatory reporting laws regarding substance use disorder and pregnancy. Senators Julie Rosen and Michelle Benson and I worked with providers, patients, counties, law enforcement, and hospitals to lift the reporting requirements when a pregnant person with substance use disorder continued prenatal care and engagement with their providers. This was a good first step toward encouraging rather than discouraging people from seeking the care they need in order to optimize outcomes for mothers and their babies. Minnesota had some of the most punitive laws in the country regarding substance use disorder during pregnancy, so these changes were overdue. When pregnant women are penalized for disclosing their substance use disorder to healthcare providers, they generally avoid prenatal care and other beneficial healthcare services. Mandatory reporting of controlled substance use after prenatal screenings can lead to distrust of providers and avoidance of prenatal care during pregnancy. Studies indicate that prenatal care with a trusted provider greatly reduces the negative effects of substance abuse during pregnancy, including decreased risks of low birth weight and prematurity. Drug enforcement policies that deter women from seeking prenatal care are detrimental to the welfare of the mother and baby. The more punitive the laws, the worse health outcomes are for both moms and babies. Since this law went into effect, there remains some confusion among health systems, and providers and patients are still being reported to child welfare. thus the impetus for this bill. Health systems and providers are asking for more guidance, and the complexity of this issue warrants a comprehensive examination and plan to improve our response for mothers, babies, and their families in order to optimize outcomes. The bill would create a task force inclusive of providers, social workers, county attorneys, law enforcement, substance use disorder providers, community members with lived experience, and more, to develop uniform standards for testing and reporting and to evaluate culturally responsive, financially sustainable, and effective substance use disorder treatment options that would preserve families struggling with substance use disorder whose children are at risk of removal from the home. We know that reporting varies widely and contributes to racial disparities and disproportionate numbers of American Indian and Black children involved in the child protection system. This task force would be an important step toward reducing disparities, supporting pregnant people, and getting them the care they need to keep their children safe and their families together. Seeking prenatal care should not expose a woman to criminal or civil penalties such as incarceration, involuntary commitment, loss of custody of her children, or loss of housing. This is an opportunity to improve outcomes for women, children, and families, and to create a brighter future for all of us. And Mr. Chair, there should be several letters of support in your packets, and I do have 2 testifiers.
Sorry, Senator, I need to go back just a second. So the amendment to the amendment is still in front of us.
Very good, Mr. Chair.
The amendment as amended is still in front of us. The amendment as amended. So we had done that, but we never closed the amendment as amended in front of us. All those in favor of Senator Rasmussen's amendment as amended, correct? Did I get that right?
Aye.
Senator Mann offered the A2 and Rasmussen offered the, so Senator Mann's, according to Senator Mann's amendment, this amendment, I need this in writing, just a second. Somebody write this down.
Rasmussen's amendment.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Senator
I
Rasmussen.
move the A2 amendment as amended.
There we go.
All those in favor say aye. Aye, opposed, same sign. Is that correct? Now, for the record, we
Yes.
just got that correct. Thank you, Senator Mayquaid, all the way from Apple Valley, Minnesota. Appreciate that. Senator Morrison, that is no longer in front of us. It is now yours, so thank you.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to repeat my opening remarks?
No, I don't. But I do want to, you mentioned one thing. What I found out last night, 50% of incarcerated women in the state of Minnesota have a disability. 50%. That was something that there's seven known facts about disability and it came up, Senator Abler, when we were sitting there, it was the talked about, housing instability, just the whole thing. But that one punched at me, that the people that are incarcerated, I don't know if it's Minnesota, I have to look at those numbers, but it's 50% of women that are in our penitentiaries. And so you remember that, it just hit that note in my mind, and it just absolutely is boggling to me. So thank you for starting this conversation again. So you have Tara Erickson and Liz Young. Who do you want to go to first?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Welcome, Ms. Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tara Erickson, and I'm here representing the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. Thank you for scheduling this bill for us this year. I do have Dr. Slago, who is our legislative chair here in Minnesota. I have testimony from her, but I think since we have a couple of physicians on, if somebody has questions, I think we'll just probably let the clinical folks take those. What I did want to say is that I have been really surprised at how the lack of data and evidence of what our mandatory reporting laws have been. And the reason why I say that is that when I started working with ACOG in 2018, what was really surprising to me is that all substances were mandated to be reported other than alcohol or cannabis. Now, one of those does the most damage to a growing baby and fetus. The other doesn't do actually a lot of harm. And so what is really surprising is that nobody had to actually report if somebody was drinking a large amount of alcohol. And so why this has been so important is that we were able to get this changed where it was discretionary as long as the patient, and this was bipartisan, as long as the patient was working with her provider to get help and the help that she needed in following a care plan. What has been really shocking is that one large county pulled data for us and said that 70% of the reports that were sent in to Child Protective Services for pregnancy were because of cannabis. And so what we realized is that, and those were mainly for minority women. So most of the time, women were reported for a substance that was not a mandated reportable substance, but that's what they were being sent in for. We need to have people around the table that understand child protection. We need to have people there around the table who are with law enforcement and who are clinical and our counties so that we can put together the best evidence-based guidelines and uniform guidelines that systems and providers can use. So we'd really appreciate your support on this bipartisan bill. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Erickson? See, none. I got one over here. God, look at this. I'm not paying attention because, I seem to can't get my amendments right, so I might as well not get anything else right. So go ahead, Senator Etke.
I have to bring some golf balls and I can just lob them down at you. But question for you, when you were stating the alcohol versus cannabis, is cannabis all-inclusive of all drugs, or is it specific to cannabis? I mean, when they fill out that questionnaire or whatever they do, if it was additional drugs, would that be another box to check?
It's Ms. Erickson.
Mr. Chair and Senator Utke, so when they do a drug panel test, marijuana or cannabis is its own. So if it was opioids, that would come in. All of them are different. And so the ones that would show up, if somebody was just using cannabis, that is what would show up on the tox screen, and then that would be what was reported. So they are separate.
Okay.
Senator.
Thank you, because that was, when I look at what's in the bill, I've got one hospital in particular in my region that has a tremendous amount of babies born under the influence.
Absolutely.
It's staggering and it's sad. And there is a lot of alcohol and there's also a lot of drugs of all kinds. And so that's why that came up. And, I'm just kind of, and I think we got testifiers ahead of us yet, so it's probably a little early, but just wondering how we're going to get the participation we need in this, and I guess that's why there's a study, because as it's been mentioned, I think some will avoid maybe even going in for medical care because they might get questioned and they don't want to be, even though they know they're heavy users. So, going forward, but this task force will have a lot of work in its future. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Etke. Are you going to speak there, Ms. Young, on behalf of Hennepin County?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you so much. My name is Liz Young, and I'm a public policy manager with Hennepin County. I want to thank you, Chair Hoffman, and members of this committee for considering this bill today, and of course, Senator Morrison. Today, I'd like to share the perspective of Kristen Huffman, a program manager at Hennepin County who wasn't able to join us. Ms. Huffman oversees all of the reports of prenatal exposure, is a 20-year veteran in child welfare work, and is excited to see this bill being brought forward as multidisciplinary guidance is needed around the intersection of child safety, maternal and child health, and substance use disorder. We were pleased to see last session's legislation, which allows for prenatal health care providers to forego their mandate to report pregnant patients with substance use disorder to Child Protection if those patients are engaged in their prenatal care. While this legislation is a positive step forward in prioritizing maternal and child health and well-being, it hasn't prevented mothers from being tested and reported on at birth by outside providers or hospitals. In Hennepin County in 2022, a mother identifying as multiracial where at least one race was Black or African American was 7 times more likely to be reported on than a white mother. If the mother is Indigenous, that number jumps to almost 37 times more likely to be reported. Since this legislation was passed last session, there has been only a 20% reduction in reports regarding prenatal exposure to alcohol or controlled substances in Hennepin County. In order to better support and partner with families, recommendations are needed around many aspects of maternal and child health and substance use disorder. To name just a few, experts need to know more about specific substances and their different impacts on the fetus, the accuracy of toxicology testing, the impact of substance use disorder on the family system, as well as considerations of parent-infant attachment during treatment. The creation of a task force on pregnancy health and substance use disorder is the natural next step in continuing to support pregnant patients and their infants, while also developing measures to ensure child safety without unnecessarily involving families with the child protection system. The recommendations for the diversity of task force members will allow for important voices to be heard across the continuum of child and family health and well-being. Hennepin County Child and Family Services is excited to improve best practices for parents and their newborns, and we strongly support SF 2139. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Senator Morrison. As it gets coming to your committee, I think one of the things to highlight, these are Title V public health indicators that we should already be integrating. So I think, is the bill staying then with you? Are you, or Gold, do you know if is it staying with you, or what
Mr.
are we
Chair, I
doing
guess
with
I
this
don't know.
bill?
Mr. Chair, I think it has to go to state and local gov.
Oh, yes, the task force, yeah.
Somebody talk to me, and then what?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Erickson.
My understanding is that it has gone to State Gov in the House and is now going to Health.
Maternal child health.
Yeah.
This task force already exists. Why? I mean, what?
No,
why?
it doesn't.
No. Maternal child health task force does exist. The indicators in here. How are you going to integrate with them? And I'm just trying to get my hands around the fact that if it's going to all these committees, eventually it should end up like public health over there to Senator Wickland. And then the question that I'll ask at that committee is, okay, where's Title V people having this conversation? Because these health indicators are all in, do you want me to give you a history on Title V in the state of Minnesota or the United States? I'm kidding, but
If I say no, is
I'm
that
kidding. Go ahead, Ms. Erickson, keep going. Anyway.
Mr. Chair, I would really welcome, I think ACOG would, and everybody who's been very engaged in this would welcome to see if there are other indicators and what groups we could work with on this initiative. But it's very needed work, and it's got to get done. So.
Any comments, questions? Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a brief comment and a question. Just wanted, we talked a little bit about cannabis use and the impact it can have on a pregnancy and a child while the mother is pregnant. And just wanted to point out, the CDC has kind of very clearly stated that, there is negative impacts. They believe that there's negative impacts, health risks to both the mother, but also the baby and the baby's development. And so just want to make sure that folks are aware of that it's not nothing, and that it actually is an important child welfare issue that I think my hope would be for a bill like this, that it'll help address and reduce the number of incidents where we have mothers who are using THC or other cannabis products while pregnant. And then my question, Mr. Chair, is to Senator Morrison, the bill author. Could you talk about when you think about a task force like this, how does it think about child development? How does it think about the health of a baby while in utero? And what role does the state have in protecting that baby while it's in development and its future prospects?
Senator Morrison, my question's still out there. Why isn't the Maternal Child Health Task Force in the state of Minnesota already addressing this? And that'll question I'll ask at the next one. I just asked that out loud, but Senator Morris to Senator Rasmussen's point.
Mr. Chair and Senator Rasmussen, thanks for the question. I think we have a real opportunity before us. Our health systems, our providers, a whole array of community members are asking for help on how to address the complex intersectionality that these issues bring up. I'm glad you reminded everyone that cannabis is not a recommended drug during pregnancy, and this is another opportunity to educate providers about that and to educate patients as well. So the big thing, I mean, I can tell you from personal experience in the past, if a patient had come to me and said, Dr. Morrison, I'm struggling with opioids, I need help, I would be mandated to turn her in. And that's not conducive to good care. That's not conducive to trust between provider and patient. That does not help good outcomes in the end. So the idea behind this effort is to create guidelines that hospitals and providers can follow and clearly understand, because it's turned into a little bit of a patchwork response to how to manage this. So that's why I think this is so important, and it's in everyone's interest that both the pregnant person, the woman, and the pregnancy have the best possible outcomes. So thanks for the question.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? So, Senator Mann had the original amendment, correct? And she made the motion. Is that correct, Senator Mann? This bill, as amended, be referred to Health and Human Services, correct?
It needs to come to my committee, but it also needs to go to state and local. And I was looking at the appropriation as to the LCC, so I don't know whether that's something that would be done in my committee. So it could come to my committee first.
All right, so here's what I get from council. It's adjusted, it goes to HHS and then the state gov.
Great.
My question still is on the table. Where is the Maternal Child Health Bureau Task Force, state of Minnesota, in this conversation? So that's just what I think, Senator Wickland. So with that motion to, as Senator Mann moves as amended, did I get that right? Senate File 2139 be re-referred to Health and Human Services. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Thank you, Senator McQuay. It is there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members.
Thank you. Thank you for this work.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely, thank you. Senator Bolden, thank you. Come on up. We got remote supervision of personal care assistance services authorization. I love this one. Senate File 1567. You got an A1 amendment, so who?
Mr. Chair, I'm a co-author. I'll move the bill and the amendment.
Thank you, Senator Abler. Senator Bolden, do you want to talk about your A1, or Senator Abler, do you want to talk about your A1, or all those in favor? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. And thank you, Senator Abler. The A1 puts the bill in the shape I would like it. It adds, changes the effective date, and it adds a little more detail to and clarification to the process. And I'm happy to talk about the bill as a whole now, if you prefer, or after the amendment is adopted.
Senator Abler, there is no A1 amendment attached here. Do you happen to have that? Guess what? Now. Huh.
Mr. Chair, is it a very long amendment? I would be happy if the author would simply read it to us.
I'm fine with that.
Just the interest of time.
Yeah,
Oh, it's
go
pretty
ahead.
long?
You want a paper copy? Senator Ecke. to that point.
Mr. Chair, I'm willing to wait for a paper copy.
All right, Senator Abler, we'll wait for a paper copy then. Paper copy will be on its way. So talk to us, Senator Bolden, while we wait for your paper copy, I guess.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. So I am grateful to have the opportunity to present Senate File 1567 this evening. This would allow certain, not all, but certain PCA recipients with compromised immune systems to have their qualified professional, or QP, visit performed remotely versus in person. A qualified professional, as I said, also known as a QP, is a person employed by the PCA agency who provides training, supervision, and evaluation of the agency's PCA workers and the services they deliver. Qualified professionals are nurses, social workers, mental health professionals, and qualified designated coordinators. A QP performs the following duties: training, supervision, and evaluation of PCA workers, evaluation of the effectiveness of PCA services. These visits typically occur 2 to 4 times a year, and they are not hands-on services. PCA services are foundational to meeting the needs of a diverse population of some of Minnesota's most vulnerable citizens. These services help over 44,000 Minnesotans live as independently as possible in our communities. COVID-19 has impacted the disability community and people of color more severely than the general population. This policy would allow these recipients with compromised immune systems, or a member of their household with having a compromised immune system, to continue to receive the crucial services and get the support they need without having additional agency workers in their home to conduct these qualified professional visits by allowing them to be done via video. The PCA program is the most diverse home and community-based service, with 63% of recipients being Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Many recipients live in multi-generational households. COVID is still impacting people, and especially people with disabilities and diverse populations. In the summer months, accommodations can be made for in-person visits. For example, the QP can do the visit outside or through a screen door, but this isn't possible in Minnesota winters, when other contagious diseases like the flu or RSV are also at their peak. So this is not a blanket for all PCA recipients, and PCA agencies do not get to opt out of in-person visits. Remote visits need to be at the request of the service recipient and approved by their healthcare provider, and will be documented by the agency. The goal of this bill is to ensure our most vulnerable PCA recipients can receive remote qualified professional visits while also creating safeguards for program integrity. So happy to answer questions, and we do have a testifier as well, Mr. Chair.
We're still waiting for the wonderful piece of paper, but I appreciate that. To me, that, right, members, this is like one of those, hello, which hand is the rock in? This should be a no-brainer for us. So look at that. Is that the piece of paper we're waiting on? Thank you.
Mr. No, we were waiting to read the piece of paper. So, Mr. Chair, I move the piece of paper titled A1.
Senator Abler moves the A1 amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you, and thank you for explaining it. So, Noel Domeyer.
Very close.
Very close.
Chair
That's
Hoffman,
better than I've
committee.
done before in the past, so I appreciate you saying that's close. Welcome to the committee, so state your name.
My name is Noelle Domeyer. I work as a qualified professional, or as she said, as a QP for Best Care. It's a PCA 245D and financial management service provider. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on this bill, and thank you, Senator Bolden, for authoring it. Per statute, during a supervisory visit, a qualified professional must evaluate the satisfaction of services, review the service recipient's month-to-month plan of hours, review documentation, document changes to the care plan, and review its goals and the PCA's performance. QPs are required to complete an initial in-home visit as well as an annual in-home visit. So the frequency of the additional visits, it's dependent on the service that the client actually chooses. There's a minimum of 2 visits required each year for PCA Choice and 4 visits required each year for PCA Traditional. More visits can be provided based on the needs of the client or the supervisory needs of those PCAs. So why is this bill needed? We believe this bill would allow us to practice a person-centered approach for people with a compromised immune system. It aims to decrease the risks of contracting a potentially life-threatening illness, and it empowers the clients with these compromised immune systems to receive services in a way that helps them feel safe while being able to maintain these services without punitive action due to noncompliance for home visits. While most people have resumed normal life after COVID, many people with compromised immune systems still live in fear of contracting the illness. I currently have a caseload of 136 clients. I am Best Care's Spanish interpreter, and 37 of my clients speak only Spanish. I work hard to develop relationships with my clients beyond the required visits. Some I have known for over 7 years. On any given day, I may have up to 5 scheduled in-home visits going from home to home, which could increase the risk and put these immune-compromised clients at risk. Allow me to provide a few real examples of just 2 of my clients who have been requesting that I do not come to their home. One is a 31-year-old woman with a compromised immune system and frequently hospitalized. She lives in a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 generations, including her grandmother, who's currently receiving treatment for stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Another client I serve is an elder woman at end of life battling a terminal illness. We saw during COVID, in the Minnesota peacetime emergency, when visits were allowed to be performed remotely, that QPs were able to meet the DHS guidelines by providing training, supervision, and evaluation of services through a mix of the in-person visits and telehealth. We believe QPs are experts in their field and can fulfill their required duties with excellence, even when completed with a video call. We also believe that we can continue to capably assess the health and safety needs of all of our clients in a dignified manner, while giving these clients a choice to direct their services in a way that works best for them. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Please support Senate File 1567.
Thank you, Ms. Stollmeyer. Thank you for your work, and thank you for caring that you want to see it continue in the things that are important to people, and that is person-centered, how you just explained that, so I appreciate that. Any questions for our good senator? Disposition of this, do you want to go, is there a, what do you want to do with this, Senator?
This can go to the floor.
I was just looking down the line. There's nothing. You want to go to the floor? This should go to the floor. That's my thought. I'm waiting. Senator Wickland, Senator Mann, Senator Rasmussen, deep in thought.
Chair.
Senator Abler.
Senator Bolden, you don't mind going to the floor, do you? Mr. Chair, I'd like to move this bill to the floor then.
Wow.
To be recommended to pass and be sent to the floor.
As amendment, can we
As
do
amended.
that? As
Excuse me.
amendment,
Thank you for that.
Senator Abler, you want me to wait? Senator Abler moves that Senate File 1567 as amended be placed on general orders. Am I clear on the motion? Am I clear on that? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Gavel down. Congratulations, you're going to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, committee members and Mr. Chair.
Members,
Thank you.
Wednesday we come back. There's some bills up. Should be in your 6 of them, and then we need to start taking what we've done and what's been done in the other body too. Talk about what's up, how are we going to do our omnibus policy, omnibus finance, start putting things. So get your mind thinking about what we're doing, and I appreciate your input. So with that, members, thank you for all we're doing. We are adjourned.